The Metro on WDET. I'm Tia Graham. The Trump administration wants American museums to be less critical of our history. Yesterday, the Smithsonian Institution submitted thousands of documents regarding exhibitions and programming to the White House for a review of, quote, improper ideology. Since last year, President Trump's been pressuring the Smithsonian Institution to celebrate American exceptionalism and not to focus so much on the inconvenient, ugly parts of our nation's history, like the institution of slavery. What the president does next remains to be seen, but the effort to censor and rewrite history and culture raises important questions about American culture, history, and our identity as a nation. Though museums are now a politicized institution, they're among the most trusted in America. Devin Ackman joins me now to discuss all of this. He's the director of Michigan State University Museum and is a core faculty member in MSU's Arts, Cultural Management, and Museum Studies program. He recently published a piece in The Conversation, Detroit, How Museums Can Help Rebuild Trust in a Divided America. Devin, welcome back to the Metro.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on the show.
No, of course. This is such an important topic right now. The Smithsonian submitted documents pertaining to its exhibitions and programming to the White House yesterday. This is following months of pressure campaign President Trump has launched against the institution. What was your reaction to that news?
Not very surprising, to be honest. I mean, a lot of this began very early in his second term, and as many of the listeners on the show will recall, there was an executive order going back to March of last year called Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History. So that kind of set off this ongoing wave of critique of the Smithsonian, in particular 8 of the 21 museums, and navigating the complexities of what is being displayed and what perhaps isn't being displayed.
Yeah, and is the governmental review of exhibitions and programming a normal part of how museums like the Smithsonian operate?
Absolutely not.
Wow.
In fact, in the case of the Smithsonian, it's largely been independent, certainly of the executive branch. We've always had, ongoing debates in our society over perhaps what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate, the so-called culture wars. But to have this type of intervention, especially coming directly from the executive branch and the administration, is really it's a new chapter.
It is a new chapter. And as a director of a museum, how does it make you feel personally having this be the new chapter within museums?
Well, it's incredibly concerning. It's concerning for a lot of reasons. It's, as you alluded to at the top of the show, we are among, some of the most trusted institutions in our society. Having said that, back in the fall, the president had shared on social media that universities and museums were the last bastion of wokeness in this country and needed to be dealt with. So, in many ways, the Smithsonian is, so to speak, the canary in the coal mine. Of course, we're all watching what this means. We're certainly concerned because it implications to funding. Yeah. What will this do with the National Endowment for the Arts, Humanities, and other federal funding agencies? So we're kind of on standby right now.
Yeah. And Devin, President Trump has repeatedly criticized the Smithsonian's representation of history, complaining it focuses too much on the history of slavery in America, for example. Why should museums include the ugly, worst parts of American history?
Well, first of all, it's our job to tell true, factual, evidence-based information. That's paramount. And second of all, I think museums are really very important social infrastructure for this type of dialogue. We're often dialogic in nature to begin with. And as we continue to see shrinking social spaces in our society, we need places like museums, especially given their place in society and how they are trusted. We have this unique role as informal learning institutions to create space for tough discussions. And to censor that is really doing a disservice to our democracy.
Devin, when you joined our show last year, you told us about how trusted museums in America are. Now museums are politicized. What effect do you think that will have on public trust in museums overall?
That's my greatest concern right now as we navigate this is, will this erode or will the American public, continue to hold us in a high esteem in that regard? I think, the great thing about museums is we're in all communities across this country, urban, rural, doesn't really matter what your political persuasion is. We are in your community. There's over 35,000 museums in this nation. So, I think if we continue to do the business where, we've been in this game a long time, and as long as we can continue to garner that trust, we will endure this moment.
And in your piece, in the conversation, you argue that museums have an opportunity and a responsibility in the divided moment we share. What is that opportunity?
Well, that's going to look a lot different for a lot of different institutions. There are certainly institutions that are perhaps more bold in how they're presenting information or pushing back on some of these things. I think of my colleagues out in Los Angeles, the Japanese American National Museum, a museum that was founded based on, this tragic portion of American history with the internment of the Japanese American Society and how that galvanized that community. And they've done a really remarkable job in saying, no, we were created for a particular reason and our community supports us in that. Other museums are taking different approaches. We're heading, as you know, into our nation's 250th, and this is a really complicated time for museums.
Yes, it is.
Our museum, we've kind of shifted directions on how we're approaching that. In fact, we're looking more speculatively at what is the future of the democracy as opposed to looking back. And part of that, I would say that has more to do with the fact that we think we can have a better dialogue on the topic and a less politicized topic. But that's just two examples right there. One is more speculative and future focused, and the other is more community based and rooted. So it's going to look a lot different depending on governance structures, funding structures, and just where institutions are.
It's the Metro on WDET. If you're just joining us, we're talking about museums in America. The Smithsonian is facing a pressure campaign from the Trump administration. Meanwhile, museums across the country continue to be trusted, nonpartisan spaces. Our guest is Devin Ackman, director of the MSU Museum. Now, Devin, we've been talking about the opportunity to unite people and hold space for tough conversations. You're doing that at the MSU Museum with the exhibition Blurred Realities. It touches on our relationship to the truth and our perceptions of what's real and what is not. So what is the idea behind this exhibition?
Yeah, this is exactly what I was alluding to. So this is the first of our two kind of speculative exhibitions we're doing linked with the semi-quincentennial of our nation. And this is really about examining the complex challenges posed by disinformation, misinformation, the growth of artificial intelligence, and really the evolving nature of truth. So we see this as being more than a study of deception, but an exploration of how perceptions are shaped, influenced, and at times manipulated. So our hope is that people will come in, see how information is impacting us as a society, have a little bit more knowledge and agency, and able to navigate the complexities we're shaping as it seemingly is getting more and more challenging to do so.
And is there something about discussing new technology, something people haven't really made up their mind yet is, of course, using AI in these particular spaces. But is it even possible to remove the politics from anything at this moment when we talk about just the technology being used, or we're just talking about the ways people engage with one another? Is it possible to remove politics from any of this at this moment?
It's possible, I believe. I do. A couple of the exhibitions we have, so we have four sub-themes within this exhibition. And in fact, one of them is called Truth and Manipulation in the Digital Age.
Wow.
And there are two exhibitions within that sub-theme. One is called Whispers, which really explores how digital echo chambers distort perception and entrenched ideologies. And that's looking at, from very conservative to very liberal kind of personas generated by AI and other information. Another is called Generative Persuasion, and that illustrates how large language models can be deployed to create deceptive narratives, in the sense of propaganda machines. So, you can come in here with a variety of political perspectives, but see how the technology works, see how that gets spread via social media, and hopefully that impacts your view of the information that you're encountering. So I do believe this is possible.
Yes, and you talked about it just a little bit earlier. You brought up funding cuts, and funding cuts at the federal level have affected museums across the country. We know it. We hear about it here as well, even here in the Metro Detroit area. Giving President Trump's willingness to go after funding sources, are American museums up to the task to meet the challenge you lay out, to tell the truth, and to have agency in our divided times?
I believe we are. I believe we have a lot of challenges that we face as a field. Some of those are political. Some are just virtue of kind of the world we're living in now, and other types of things people are doing with their time and attention. But I think a lot of times it really comes down to leveraging that trust, maintaining that trust, and how we continue to build our family of supporters, and a lot of that has to do with doing great, compelling work. And if we can continue to do that, we've proven it through other challenging times. COVID was an example, the Great Recession. I do believe that we can continue to navigate this.
And before we get out of here, Devin, despite the challenges museums face, the MSU Museum has just reopened after a major renovation, and that's notable given the funding and political pressures museums are under right now. What's different about MSU Museum now, and what do you look forward to when we talk about the future?
Yeah, we have a really long history at MSU. We were founded in 1857 with the first oncoming class at this campus when there was only 500 museums in this nation. So this was really about upgrading our infrastructure to be at the vanguard of collection stewardship. But we did create a lot of new spaces in here to enable our students, faculty, and community to interact with the million objects and specimens in our collection. Because we know our students need vital social infrastructure, we created lots of drop-in places, like basically living rooms throughout the museum, and just a lot of ways to interact, maybe non-traditional ways of interacting with the museum. But for us, it's really about evolving and meeting our audiences at where they are today, and we're continuing to do that work.
Devin, I just want to say, number one, go green.
Go white.
All right. Devin Ackman is the director of Michigan State University Museum and is a core faculty member in MSU's Arts, Cultural Management, and Museum Studies program. He recently published a piece in The Conversation Detroit, How Museums Can Help Rebuild Trust in a Divided America. Devin, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro today.
You bet. Thank you.
Remember, you can listen to all of the conversations we have on the Metro on our podcast. Just find the Metro WDET on your app of choice or go over to wdet.org/Metro. And the Metro is produced by Sam Corey, Carrie Jr. II, Robin Vincent, and me, Tia Graham. Our engineer is Nate Bender, music done by Sam Bobian, and our senior producer is David Lyons. The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. And this is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. You all have a great day. Drive safely.